Thanks a million for coming, man. Really happy to have
That's
you
great to
join
be
us.
here.
So,
I'm honored to be here.
for those of you that don't know Fred, he's one of the best examples of a leader in this industry that I've ever seen, honestly. I've personally witnessed him transform a U.S. bank over the last couple of years from a culture that was afraid to innovate, afraid to implement new technologies, afraid to change the things because they've always been done that way, to pushing the freaking limits of what you can really do and just making it happen. I mean, over a couple of years has literally transformed an organization, not just on the tech side, but on a culture side as well, on the mortgage side. So I think, why don't we start out, maybe tell us a little bit about the story and when you came in to your role and what you saw.
Yeah, I have a question first, though. Why do they call these things fireside chats when there's no fireplace? Anyway,
I think at one time there was a fireplace, a lot way back maybe.
It's because it's much warmer in here than it is in the hallway.
Yeah, that's
To
true.
be honest with you.
So I joined U.S. Bank in late September of 2015. And I'd spent, and you painfully reminded everybody that it's my 29th year in the business, but spent majority of that.
You don't look a day over 40.
Well, thank you. It's the authentic moments that keep me grounded. But I spent the majority of that in the bank space, with Citi, 2 tours of duty, and Norwest Wells Fargo in between. And so I'd spent 3 years roughly in the non-bank space, and it was great education, but I was really excited to get back to a brand like U.S. Bank and a culture like U.S. Bank, they're both very extraordinary things, but also going into it knowing that the challenges from a mortgage standpoint, and probably across the entire franchise, which now are being addressed, really was a big piece of it was sort of we were behind the curve from a technology standpoint. And that combined with inconsistent service delivery were the biggest challenges that we had from day one. But I think if you have a brand and a culture and an organization that's willing to think about things differently, you can overcome all that. So it was ended up being a great decision, but that's kind of where we were in late 15 when I joined.
And I think the thing that I've found unique about you guys is, in this slide here, you guys realize, in my opinion, that the competitive advantage is more than just putting in a new piece of tech and saying, hey, we've got this, we're ahead now in digital transformation, but competitive advantage and really leveling up is the combination of the great brand, like you talked about, an amazing team. I think you've got an incredible team, a lot of people that have followed you in your career, but also just relentless execution. Would you agree with that? That combination of things is really part of what you're.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important point. And I heard Todd Duncan talk about it. I remember Todd Duncan speaking in 1995 when I was with Citi about technology in itself doesn't.
That was like before the internet.
Yeah, well, it was.
Totally.
Technology in itself doesn't accomplish anything unless it enables a value add, right? It enables you to get closer to your customer, to provide your employee base, your sales force, and your national operations group of employees value. So they enjoy what they do more, they feel like they're enabled to accomplish more. And what struck me about our situation was, and kind of the first tour of duty I did running around the country talking to regional groups was, we've got the brand, we've got the culture, and I inherited an amazing leadership team, and we augmented that over time. We've got leaders that understand our business and care about you as human beings. Now imagine if we add technology and execution from a service perspective to that, and we'll be an absolute force to be reckoned with. But you just throw technology into a culture that doesn't work or a brand that doesn't work, it doesn't accomplish much. The combination of the two, though, is you can move mountains.
So, Fred, the mortgage industry is incredibly entrepreneurial, as you know. How do you, in a very large organization that you run, how do you stay entrepreneurial?
Well, I think fortunately, and most of my 29 years were spent in big companies. And one of the things early on that a mentor said to me that stuck with me to this day is that whatever you are managing, if you're managing 2 human beings or 3,300, you have an ability to build your own culture regardless of what the overall organization is doing. And that doesn't mean you go completely rogue, and off the reservation, but you can really create a culture, I think, on your own, and then figure out ways. And working at Citi all those years helped me tremendously in doing that because it was a very matrix-driven organization. So, running retail at Citi I had multiple bosses, and my obligation was to figure out how to influence and work with various people around the organization to drive change that would help the folks in our organization. So it's sort of like when people ask about empowerment. I've never felt, from the time I've been a leader in this industry, I've never felt unempowered, because I believe wholeheartedly that empowerment is sort of up to every leader to find. But it's also a double-edged sword, because with empowerment comes responsibility. So I think you look at great athletic teams, look at the Patriots, they did not have an advantage on paper over the Rams, regardless of what team you root for. But that Patriot organization, through Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft, and I can't stand the Patriots, but I respect, I'm a Viking fan through and through, which means I've been a miserable human being since I was 4 years old. But
Tortured soul.
They have built a culture there that outdoes everybody else, right? And so you ask the question, why can the Patriots build a culture that's better than any other NFL team that has the same ability to do that?
So this kind of ties into it a little bit about culture and stuff and where you came from. That was a great introduction by Tony. These large organizations you've run for many, many years, but you started out as a loan officer, right? Tell us a little bit about where you started at and how that has affected your perspective running these large organizations.
It's absolutely huge in so many different ways. So when I got out of grad school, I joined the old Citicorp Mortgage in 1989, which, as an aside, was the number one had the number one market share in the industry, doing a whopping $1 billion annually. So that's how old I am in terms of where the industry's come from then. But I got out of this program and had 2 opportunities in the home office in St. Louis. And I really had an idea at that point what I wanted to do at some point. And so people said I was crazy at the time, but I picked up a rifle and I went out and went to Seattle, Washington, was drop lifted into Seattle, Washington as a loan officer. And that experience for the 2 years that I did it has shaped me more than just about anything else that I've ever done, because we didn't have a branch. This was before the days of in-house mortgage companies or MSAs or those kinds of things. So I just went office to office, sneaked behind the receptionist desk until I got kicked out, and did presentations and built a client base. But what really was the biggest thing for me is I remember a point where, and I'd been an athlete in college and very, very successful from an academic perspective and was accustomed to success. And I remember about 2 months in, saying, I'm going to fail at this. I can't do this. I'm getting no's all day long. And I just didn't know quite how to handle that. And then I also remember 2 months later the point when I realized I can do this forever, and it was the most empowering moment of my entire life. I believe now the job I'm in, and I didn't fathom then that this is where I'd be, I don't think I could be effective if I didn't have that understanding of what it's like to be a loan officer, and how dependent you are as a loan officer on the service and the tools that your organization provides you for your livelihood. And so I think that perspective is incredibly important, and one that never left me, for the last 29 years.
Yeah, and I would say from my perspective, being in the mortgage business a long time, dealing with loan officers, I think having that grounded aspect from the front line and taking that to the top is what keeps you connected and successful, or one of the things that keeps you connected and successful. So very important about your history. So let's talk next about big tech. And 21 years ago now, you and I were in a management training program together at Wells Fargo, and we heard somebody speak about the threat of big tech. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and it really is relevant to today as we talk about Amazon and fintechs and all the stuff that's happening. And the theme of the meeting was Microsoft is entering the mortgage business, so we're all going to be dead in the next
Like this meeting actually
36
happened.
months, and the loan officer will cease to exist, and cats and dogs living together, if you've ever seen that movie. You know, Armageddon is coming. And you know, so we've had similar situations like that, although I do think we're entering a historic period now, where some of that is actually coming to fruition. But yeah, it's funny when you think about, someone sent me an email of a flyer that an LO did in 1985, and two things were hilarious.